I'm back. Back home. Feels good to be back here. It doesn't happen often, but I was very excited at the idea of recording this today. I think it's because last week I had to record it in Paris in a different setting, and it wasn't as pleasurable. The camera decided to turn off for some reason. I don't know what's happening. It was plugged in. So now for the whole episode, I'm gonna have to keep looking back at the camera to make sure it's still on. I suppose I'll start by saying, Happy New Year. It is a new year, so I'm getting paranoid. It is a new year, whatever that means. Really, that's what I had to say. Happy New Year, whatever. So I came back from Paris recently. I took the Eurostar. I bought my ticket for the return in advance. I knew if I had to buy one ticket, it was the return, and the reason is, I moved to London in around 2012, I believe. So it's been 12 years, and for the first almost 10 years, I only took the coach. It was less expensive. I would travel with my brother. Parents mostly took care of purchasing the tickets at the start, when I was a kid. So it was cheaper. And at the start, my father even had to bring us. He had to bring us back to London and return on the same day on the coach, which is like a full day of traveling. Horrible. And so since now, I'm in control of that, I buy myself Eurostar tickets, especially since I've only gone to Paris once a year for the past 2 years. So there's a bit of nostalgia in traveling on the coach. So I'm not against it. But I knew the return had to be on the Eurostar because I remember every time going to Paris, in that period of being in Paris, I would think, the day where I had to leave kept getting closer with each day, and the dread of having to take the coach again, was playing on my mind, and so it would cast a shadow on the whole holidays, thinking, I'm gonna have to take the coach again. Therefore, I bought a train ticket for the return. Now, last time I did both on the train because I bought my tickets in advance, but this time I was stupid. And the Eurostar is pretty pleasurable. There was floods on the tunnel at some point recently, for the past few days, I think. And so we got an announcement before leaving saying the train is delayed indefinitely because of floods on the tunnel, which was scary and annoying because I'm used to hearing we have delays on the coach. Coach is always late. That's just the way it is. But on the train, it's almost like commuting to work. It's so quick, so short. Turns out there wasn't a huge delay. I don't have headphones at the moment, which was interesting on the journey going to Paris, being on the coach 14 hours because of the delays with no headphones. It was a challenge, but it wasn't that difficult. On the return though, I was on the train, which is supposed to be less awful, without my headphones once again. And somehow I was on the coach, train, the carriage, which contained all the babies traveling back to London. So just in front of me, there was a square with a family, with a kid, 8 years old, around that age. And then next to me was a mother with her son, who was about between, I would say, around 2 years old. And then everywhere else, strategically placed around the carriage were babies. And the baby on my right was doing that thing that babies do. I don't know why. I've never had a baby, obviously, but babies all do that. They'll go like this. I don't know if they're testing their vocal cords or what, but he kept going for like 15 minutes. And then what happened was that one baby would start crying somewhere and just set off this chain reaction where all the babies on the carriage would start making noises. And the baby on my right, his mother, he wasn't crying, but he was making that weird noise for a while. She didn't do anything. When he started crying, she would kind of tell him, all right, chill. This is not cool. There's other people around. But she wasn't too bothered when he was making noise. And there was another baby far down with a family, and he started making the slightest noise. He started kind of crying, and the parents along with, it seems like everyone in the carriage around that area said shh, and the kid shut up. Then the kid to my right, the noisiest one, went to sleep. One other kid at the back started crying. His mother just grabbed him and ran the full length of the carriage to get out of the carriage and isolate that noise somewhere else. Like she was carrying a bomb that would set off, once again, a chain reaction that would just destroy all of us. So she ran away. That was the only sensible parent in the whole carriage. I don't understand how you can be so inconsiderate that you'll let your kid just make noise, that much noise continuously. You had to tell him to shut the fuck up. Not that way, obviously, but you have to be, you have to be considerate, is my thinking. You can't not care at all. So that was, I wouldn't say fun, that was interesting. I might use that in a movie actually one day. This idea of just, it's probably been done in a movie before. This chain reaction of crying babies, being surrounded on all sides. It was awful at one point, but it was a bit funny too. So, as I was, preparing to record this, I thought about how I was a bit excited at the idea of doing this. Surely the messages I've received, the comments I received recently, have kind of inspired me. And I was thinking about how I've always had this idea that I would love to have a channel one day, like a TV channel. Nowadays, I was born in 99, so I remember waking up in the morning, watching TV, watching the animated stuff in the morning, and having to be awake at a certain time, having to be in front of the TV at a certain time to watch a certain thing. Nowadays, that doesn't exist anymore. Everything is timeless. Everything exists out of time on the internet. And I do understand that on one hand, there are still people nowadays who watch TV, who will wait for a certain time to watch the news and things like that. But most people, the majority, don't, because you don't have to. If you want to watch something, you don't even have to pay for it anymore. You go on streaming, it's there for free, anytime, any place. They release shows every episode at once. And yet I would still love to have an actual channel on TV where you do have to sit at a specific time to watch a specific show. And so I was thinking about what... It sounds a bit abstract when I say I would like to have a channel. I mean, the idea of a channel is that you have all these different programs for different ages, right? They're placed strategically, so you have the kids shows at a certain time. Past a certain hour, you get the more adult stuff. And I like this idea. I like the idea of building stuff as an artist. And building stuff can be an image. You build an image, you can build a story. And a channel seems like this. It's like, I remember when I did my interview for uni, I said I want to make films because films contain every art form in them. Can have music, can have visuals, music, choreography. That can be just dancing, but that can be a fight scene, and that can also just be blocking. When you look at the best directors of all time, which most people don't even understand what a good director is. It's very complicated, I suppose. But blocking is one of those things that certain directors are extremely good at and some directors completely don't understand what it is. So people like Spielberg, Akira Kurosawa, I think High and Low is one of my favorite examples of blocking. And it's mostly static. It's amazing. It's so good. And so you have all these layers of things, editing, blah, 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 all these layers of things that you control to create this product. And you can include music, as I said, choreography, every art form in them. But then with a channel, you can include every genre now of what visual media can be. So the first thought that came to my mind was, it's funny because it's the first time I ever thought of this. I've thought about making a horror film, a drama, every genre, but I suppose that's that's fiction. Then I have thought about documentary, although not that much. I'm not as interested in that. But when I thought about this idea of a channel, I thought about reality TV, because reality TV gets a bad rep, mostly because what gets the most eyes and what gets made the most is usually quite, well, it's stupid, it's mindless, it's often quite sexualized as well. But the whole idea behind reality TV is that you can explore the human condition in a different way from what you could do with fiction, because you're not in total control of what happens. So I think it's very appealing. I mean, when you find those rare reality shows where there is substance, it's enjoyable. And as I say this, I have no idea. I couldn't name one. I don't watch that much. I don't watch reality TV. I've done it more in a guilty pleasure type of way, where I will binge watch a stupid show. I've done, what's it called? Love Island I've watched, because it's one of the shows that gets talked about the most. Really, that's about the only one. Koh-Lanta. That's a French one. It's like people stuck on an island. That's entertaining. You see, it's so entertaining, actually. You see the dynamics between people. Oh yes, I started watching Squid Game. There you go, Squid Game: The Challenge, which is a recent one. The Korean show was great, but somehow I feel like I think it's American, the challenge on Netflix thing, is better. It's better because it's even more, well, it's more human, it's more true. You get to see, I don't know if it's all real. It feels like some of it must be staged and actors must be involved. Otherwise, if it's not the case, then it's better, I feel, than the original, because of the dynamics. I mean, the umbrella man, the guy who wants to puke, that's just incredible. How do you write this character? If they did, well done. But if they didn't, it's amazing. This whole sequence of this guy is it's powerful, because you want him to make the right decision. There's so many emotions. You're angry, you're annoyed at him, he's such a pussy, but at the same time you have pity for him. All these layers, and there's a bunch of characters in that show which are impactful. And we see him for just one challenge, I believe, and yet he has this lasting impact. So that's the only show I could name, actually. But it's definitely inspired me in terms of you can make a reality show that is truly cinematic and powerful and entertaining, and not just bullshit, essentially. So the survivor ones are interesting as well, because you get to really see the deeper sides of people, the more hidden sides of people, especially in terms of manipulation, but also just survival in all its aspects. So once again, with a channel, that's the idea, you would have reality TV, basically producing all these forms of media. I think would be interesting one day. When I'm filthy rich, I'll do that. Even the news, everyone does the news nowadays on YouTube, of course, as well. And these established medias have done the news in the same way since forever. How could you do the news differently? Because it's a huge apparatus. You have people researching, people on the ground. You need to have stories. You need to talk about stuff. It's interesting. I haven't spent any time thinking about this before the video. It just occurred to me. I've always thought about the idea of having a channel one day, just because you can compile all of these different forms of media in one, and they can all be done differently. Once again, you think about the news is always the same thing. It's always approached in the same way, for the most part. It's always the same thing. So how could you do that differently? So the inspiration behind wanting to do something like that, a channel, is how could you do all these things that would be on a channel but differently, especially the most boring, established, repetitive ones like the news. And I guess I like all things. I like the idea of waking up at a certain time to watch your show as a kid, and then it's the music videos after that, and same in the evening, you can watch stuff, and then at a certain time it cuts off, you have to go to bed, and then the parents will watch HBO, they'll watch the edgy. I remember, for example, my dad watching Dexter in the evening, and me thinking, oh, I wish one day I could be an adult. This looks very scary, but I wish I could watch that as well. I just like the whole vibe of it, everything that goes into it. So yeah, a channel one day. I mean, we're far from that at the moment, but it's gonna happen. On the topic of Squid Game, there was this episode, the Marbles episode, where you have I believe is she deaf? Yeah, I think so. We have the deaf girl with this older gentleman with grey hair. And as soon as they started speaking, I saw someone else in his place. Someone who has the same vibe, the same approach. And I had to stop watching. So I had to stop watching because he reminded me so much of that other person. And immediately I could see in just a few sentences, you can see the manipulation. And you could tell so much about him in that one instance. Because when you're put in those high, stress situations where you're really pushed, that's where you reveal the uglier sides of yourself, right? And some people it takes more, some people it takes less. And this guy, first time I see him on the show, and he left a huge impact, for example, because of how real he was. And that's one thing I like about this idea of the human condition, is that we all share characteristics. Now, you have, a million things that make you, but some people share more or less characteristics with you. And this guy, in that moment, immediately reminded me of someone I know. And I could feel it physically. I was angry immediately. So once again, that's what's interesting about reality TV as opposed to fiction, is that you get these real people, and if you put them in those types of situations. And Squid Game does it so well, right? Because when you build these reality TV shows, you're trying to bring out as much as possible from people. You're trying to bring out something real. In some cases. Others, it just feels like bland, disgusting, badly written fiction. But with something like Squid Game, it's like they tried their best to really push people as much as possible, to really kind of squeeze all the juice out of them, to really get to that primal version of themselves. And I thought that was really enlightening. And also, as someone who likes to write fiction, when I see this guy who exists somewhere in America, and I think about this person who I've met, who I've known for years, and the commonality, it's interesting to think of the patterns in which people think and behave. To me, film is all about the human condition and, trying to build a character and characters. On that note, actually, I watched Cocaine Bear recently, and I think it's the best film I've seen this year, which is weird to say because you have Nolan, who made the film, some of the biggest, most accomplished and greatest filmmakers alive today, as David Fincher and Christopher Nolan. I think there was another one, perhaps. I mean, I'm sure there were more, but that's some of the biggest names. I mean, I guess you got, what's her name? The lady who made Barbie. Barbie was shit. But Oppenheimer was great. The Killer was, I'm still ambivalent about it. But Cocaine Bear, in my opinion, was the best film of the year. And what became obvious quickly is that the people who wrote it took their time in building characters and these interactions. It reminds me of Tarantino, where every interaction is its own movie, and every interaction, it's not bland, the dialogue, the way they communicate. These feel like real people for the most part. And clearly these are good writers who know what they're doing. And to be that, you need to be very observant of how people behave in order to inject that into your characters and make them feel three-dimensional, in just one interaction. Obviously, then there's the actors who have a lot of power in building characters as well. Cocaine Bear, best film of the year. It was funny. It wasn't especially scary, but they did try to, build tension and do that horror film thing. And it was funny. It was funny, and there was, as I said, there was substance and depth behind the characters. It's your classic kind of stupid, I wouldn't say cheap, but not the most expensive horror film. And they really put most of their efforts into making sure that it's never boring in the interactions. These films are repetitive. You know what's going to happen for the most part. they focused on creating characters that will have an impact. So that was interesting. The worst feedback ever. That was enlightening. I used that before. That was inspiring, for sure. Alright. I didn't mention this, but I am hoping that this will be by far the longest episode I've made. I have tons of notes that I've had some for weeks. I have wanted to make an especially long episode for a while because of the challenging aspect. The idea of speaking for so long. Is enticing. So I'm hoping this will be long. And I'm going to keep going through the notes. And now, a note that I'm not that excited to speak about because I've mentioned this multiple times before. It's there because I've talked about it multiple times and my opinion on it keeps changing. Especially because this is something that's quite new. An idea that's quite new. But I've talked about it repeatedly. So I suppose since my stance is still changing, I need to mention it. I suppose there's YouTubers, people who almost exclusively talk about this subject, which is intriguing. Semen retention. The note says clarify semen retention. Now, as I said, it's something, as in practicing it and you thinking about it more in practice, as opposed to just watching videos online of people talking about it. It's quite recent for me. And my stance currently is that semen retention essentially applies more. There's a spectrum in terms of how people interact with their or manifest their sexuality. Nowadays, in the world we live in, it's crazy. The spectrum is quite different from what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago because of the existence of porn and the fact that it's so easily accessible. So on one end of the spectrum, you'd have people, the classic incel who watches porn every day, who's, will go to the extreme, no social life. His only sexual interactions are with porn, just obsessed. All right, that's one extreme. And then on the other extreme, you'd have someone who just doesn't indulge in it at all. So I think the idea of semen retention and the reason why it's so popular nowadays is because it's a reaction to those extremes, the people who are completely, addicts, essentially, just rock bottom addicts. And for those people, semen retention is very enticing and alluring because they're so fucked up. And so I was pretty much that for a while. And for those people, it's useful. But the way they look at it is that, the way it's been portrayed, once again, I know I've talked about this before, but the way it's being portrayed is that once, once you go on this semen retention kind of streak, you're going to elevate in a way. People are going to look at you differently, blah, 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 blah. No, what happens is that when you're so fucked up, when your whole sexual side is just shattered, so broken, once you're able to get out of that, it feels extremely good because you're more yourself. Just like with any bad habit or drug, once you get off of it, you realize that wasn't you, or that was just a disgusting, broken version of you. So you get back to who you are. You get back to a real person, a more whole person, a more wholesome person, right? So for those people, of course, it's something that they might be striving towards. But once again, once you get where you want to be is in a healthy state where you're not obsessing over sex. You're not thinking about it all the time. You don't feel like your urges are controlling you. That's where you want to be. Now, I feel like I am there currently. No, I'm not there currently, but I'm not at that terrible end of the spectrum where I watch porn or I do all these things, and I'm obsessed with it and it controls my life and my energy. I'm not there. So I'm very grateful for it. And in a way, to overcorrect for my past, I thought, now I need to really control this. Abstinence is the way. If total indulgence wasn't the way, then the way must be on the complete other side, where I'm in total control. I do not indulge, I'm abstinent, I kind of hold my energy, and that's going to make me more powerful. That was the idea. And now that I am, that this version of me is more distant and I'm more balanced, so to speak, I understand that semen retention won't be that useful for me. The concept of semen retention won't be that useful to me now, because I'm in a healthy state. I don't need to go to the other extreme, right? So I suppose if you're completely lost, striving for the other extreme makes sense. But then once you spend some time being yourself, not being addicted, not being broken, you should kind of let go and let things happen naturally, and not force yourself to the other extreme, because I think that can also be unhealthy. Now there's so many aspects to it, but the idea of semen retention also is definitely about being about abstinence, being able to hold back. So if you're in a healthy state, you have a girlfriend, you don't watch porn, you don't masturbate anymore, other challenges arise. You can still indulge. So it's about being in control of your basic instincts, I suppose, and not indulging too much. Now, once again, a friend mentioned this idea to me that a man should only have sex with his wife or his girlfriend once a month, which to me is still pushing it to one extreme. And once again, this is about power, this idea that you're in control of the relationship as a man and you're not driven by your sex drive. I do believe that's too far on one extreme end. I think a more healthy way to look at it is, if you have, enough time to have sex every day of the week, then that means you're not busy enough. That means you're not, striving for something. You're not working hard enough. If you have enough time to just have sex all the time, then clearly you're not working hard enough on your goals. I think that makes sense. I have to admit, since I came back from Paris, I suppose this might be oversharing, but fuck it. I had talked to my girlfriend about this idea that I think it would be more healthy if we had less sex. And it's been hard to put into practice. And since I came back from Paris, I did not put it in practice. And I feel like, on one end, that's natural in the sense that we haven't seen each other for a while. But I do feel a sense of guilt, because I definitely felt like I was being, controlled by my sexual drive. I wasn't in control. So, as I mentioned before, I'm not wealthy, I'm not successful. I'm very much a loser at the moment. And so, in my mind, I need to make sure that I don't even have the time to indulge as much. I need to be busy. I need to get myself out of my current situation. There was another note that was a good segue from this. But god damn, I got so many notes here. Oh yeah. So on the topic of being a loser, which I've mentioned so many times now, I suppose you shouldn't, manifesting, you shouldn't say negative things about yourself, because then you reinforce them. But fuck it. I remember mentioning this a few weeks ago, this idea that relationship with money. It sounded really good. I can't even remember the actual thought. It wasn't mine, but yes, it was this idea that the way you talk to yourself, imagine you're talking to someone you love, you wouldn't be as negative, you would be more supportive. So negative self-talk is, damaging you. How to correct it. And then in the video, the lady mentioned this idea of it's the same with everything. So your relationship with money should be similar. You need to have a healthy relationship with money. And I don't. This revelation this year, becoming addicted to that shit, has hurt my finances for sure, since they only function if I'm very careful with my finances, and I haven't been careful. And my relationship with money as a whole has been negative, as in I have these things that I own that are quite expensive that I couldn't replace if I damaged or lost them. And I know this. As a result, I take care of them. I have my laptop, which beyond the monetary aspects is extremely valuable to me because of what it contains. And it's, I make videos, I make graphic design, photos, I write, and then for research, I need this laptop. So I take care of it. I don't damage it. I'm very careful with it. Same with my camera. Can't replace it. Super expensive, the whole package with the lens and etc. I was very fortunate that I was able to buy it because of my uni loan. And so I'm careful with them. But recently, I don't know why, I suppose it's a symptom of just my descent into carelessness, which started with this. I've been very careless. I dropped my mother's Apple Pencil, which I was using to draw the animated music video that I've been working on for a year. That's an expensive pencil. I dropped this. And when I dropped it, I thought, what the fuck? I'm the first person to say we need to be careful with those things that we own because they are irreplaceable at the moment. They help us as in my whole family, because most of us share these devices because we draw, we do these things, and we make money with them. So they are extremely valuable, and they are our kind of getaway or our opportunity to get out of our current situation. We are artists. If we can be successful with our art, then we can get out of being broke. So we have to value these things. As I said, I'm the first person to say this, and then I dropped the Apple Pencil, and I thought, I've had so many obstacles in this year in making the animated video. It's my first time making any kind of animation, and I decided to make an animated music video. The concept it's a bit ambitious. It's super ambitious considering I've never made anything animated. At some point, the DaVinci Resolve updated itself, and I lost all of the data. I'm sure there's a way to retrieve it, but that was months ago, so it's too late. So that was that was an obstacle. What else? We lost the Apple Pencil for a while, and then I broke it. There were more things, but there were plenty of obstacles on a project that was already quite difficult and challenging. And at the moment, I'm using my finger to draw, which it doesn't make a huge difference, it turns out. I am now driven to finish it, and I'm enjoying the process for the first time, so it's not that difficult. But I dropped the Apple Pencil, the most expensive pencil I've ever held, and I dropped it. And then there's a list here. I dropped the pencil, and then in Paris a week ago I dropped my brother's Beats by Dre earphones, which for some reason Beats by Dre things, not for some reason, but they never go down in price. Might have come out 100 years ago, it's still the same price, and these happen to be quite expensive. So I already owe my brother a lot of money. Now I need to buy him a pair again. I need to buy my mother an Apple Pencil. My overdraft is through the roof. And so clearly my relationship with money is not healthy. I am disconnected from the reality of what money is. He's saying this as he's doing this. So I don't know, to be honest, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do or how. But I'm starting the year in the worst financial position I've ever been in. which, you know, it's a challenge. I'll figure this out. But I'm confused. I'm confused as to how that happens because it's quite new to me. Men don't cry. So we've all heard this, men don't cry, and it's true. It's a simplistic way of putting it. But to me, the point is that a man should be strong enough that, one, it's not easy for them to cry, and two, they will cry in the appropriate way. As in, you can't break down crying in public. Ideally, you wouldn't cry in front of your children unless, as I said, it's appropriate. Personally, I feel strongly that the reason some people are prone to crying more easily is because they haven't dealt with past trauma. They have all this baggage, you know, of things they haven't dealt with, they haven't faced. And as a result, they're always kind of on the edge, and it's easy to push them off of the edge. I feel like I've dealt with things, I've faced them 2 years ago in a big way, and I felt much stronger after that. And so I'm trying as much as possible to always do that, to face things, to not run away. And it's a complex subject, this idea of crying, but I feel strongly that a man should be strong, and he should be able to manage his emotions. So nowadays, because crying in front of someone is a strong thing to do in some cases. It's vulnerable. It shows you trust them. But once again, if you cry on demand, if you can cry for nothing in front of anyone, then what's the value in that? So I'm saying this because I've thought about it quite a bit recently. In fact, I know there's many aspects to this. I know recently something happened that it didn't make me want to cry. It made me very upset. It was shocking and horrible, to be honest, and quite personal. And I didn't want to cry when I heard this. I was upset, and I thought about why it happened, and I didn't feel like I was holding back tears. Which, once again, when people say men don't cry, then you have the stereotype of the man who wants to cry but never does, which is ridiculous. Crying is healthy. You don't want to be someone who's holding back all the time. And then you build this baggage, and then one day you explode. So when that situation happened, that really hurt me. I thought an older version of myself would have cried there, for sure, because that was horrible. And yet I didn't feel like crying at all. I didn't feel like it was appropriate, and there was no part of me that felt like crying. And then I spent the night with my girlfriend, and I told her that something, you know, negative had happened, that I was, you know, it's a difficult thing to navigate, because I thought to myself, I don't feel like crying, but I'm definitely upset that something happened. And I don't want her to feel like I'm holding back tears because I don't want to cry in front of her. Because that's something that, I don't know if I believe it, but I think about it a lot. Should you cry in front of your significant other as a man? And the answer is yes, if it's appropriate. But in that case, I didn't feel like crying, as I said, and I was just wondering, is she gonna think, oh, why is he not crying right now? Is he, in a way, being deceitful? Which I wasn't. But there was another aspect of this. Yes, the reason I would have cried prior, 2 years ago, is because I had this baggage. I hadn't faced certain things, and so I was more prone to crying. I was less in control of my emotions. And When someone that I love dies, I'll cry. I'll cry appropriately. If someone I love is there with me, I won't hide. But I feel like it was a good sign. That's a weird thing to say, but I've been, once again, prior to those last 2 years, I've been in many situations where things pushed me towards crying. Something happened, someone was saying something, as in was revealing something that truly hurt them, and I broke down crying. Or something happened that was, not just stressful, just all around kind of shattered reality in a way for me, and I cried. And then a few weeks ago something similar happened and I didn't feel like crying. So to me, my conclusion is that the reason I cried previously was because I was on the edge and I was holding back something and I couldn't control the flow of tears. But on an other note, I almost cried recently. I was watching, I don't even know what, I was watching a Jubilee video, I think, and someone made a statement about his job. He works in a hospital and his job is to turn off the life support on people, essentially, part of his job. So he's done it multiple times, and he was describing a situation where he had to do it, and immediately I almost exploded. When you're crying and you I don't know, you gotta, like, your body just, I don't know how to describe it, but I guess when you're sobbing, you go, and I just had one little, and a tear kind of appeared. So I don't know, there's certainly many other things that I need to face, but I'm grateful that I can see how the effect of, once again, facing things that have been troubling me, facing past trauma, how doing this honestly and taking that risk, how that's affecting me, how I'm literally becoming stronger. As weird as that sounds, it's like I'm shedding these negative things, and as a result I'm becoming stronger. I know that when I quit this, I will feel stronger. And the funny thing is, I don't feel like this is affecting me. I don't feel anything except my wallet, but I don't feel like this is affecting me directly. And yet I know that when I stop doing this and I go back to being more myself, I will immediately feel a change. The longest I've stopped was for 3 days, and after 3 days I felt better somehow. So I don't know why I'm not quitting, but I will. I guess if I have one New Year's resolution, it is to quit this shit. Does a woman have a duty to give her man sex? As I said, I wouldn't say it's my guilty pleasure, but I've been sucked into these weird relationship podcasts with these red pill weirdos. And on the note here it says, even though this is below me to comment on, I will do so because it's for research purposes and because the people asking that question are more accomplished than me, more successful and older, right? So adult men who are quite wealthy as far as they portray themselves and successful have a podcast where they bring women, and one of the questions they have is, does a woman have a duty to her man to give him sex? It's hilarious. Now, once again, I have this ambition with a friend to create a podcast doing something similar, asking people questions. And so I'm watching essentially the competition. And I will use that question, not because I think it's a valid, useful question, but because I'd like to deconstruct how people even come to the conclusion that this is a question worth asking. So, I'll break down how I feel about the question. Now, the people asking the question, it's a guy specifically, I remember, who asks the question, and then he mentions that, I don't have to force or ask my girlfriend for sex, That's not a problem I have. I'm just saying, does a woman, when she's with a high value man, does she have a duty to give him sex? And I mean, the question in itself just shows a complete disconnect from reality, I believe. I've been in 2 relationships in my life, and the previous one wasn't good, and the sex aspect of it wasn't good. We were not compatible. It's as simple as that. And it did feel like sex was this thing that you have to negotiate for, that you have to negotiate for. It was strange. Why keep yourself in that situation? I don't know why I did. I will never do that again. It's part of the learning process. But I suppose there are people out there who are in relationships where that is the case. Long relationships even, where they feel like they have to negotiate for sex. And so these men on this podcast who are affecting culture, who are affecting young men, are essentially sending this idea out there that if you become a high value man, if you become wealthy, a high value man, which to them essentially means you're wealthy and in good shape, and you have all these surface level attributes. And once again, the way they paint this whole character of the high value man, then you get a bunch of women. And then essentially they are your sex slaves. Now, I know I'm exaggerating it, but essentially you are providing value because you have money, you can take care of them, blah, blah, blah. And as a result, because they are women and the most valuable thing they have to offer apparently is sex, they shouldn't even think about saying no. I need to watch the segment again because they mention other things, but the idea that the question is asked is crazy, because if you are in a healthy relationship, and I mean a truly healthy relationship, then that's not an issue. That's not something you'd have to talk about. You are a mature human being who understands that if your significant other is not in the mood for sex, then from their point of view, why would you even think of trying to pressure them into doing it? They won't feel good about it. And then how could you enjoy it, having sex with that person that didn't really feel like it, because they feel like, oh, I guess I'm just a body essentially. I'm just a woman. He's providing all the money. He's big and strong and smart. So I guess I need to play my role and give him sex. I mean, this whole question is such a disgusting representation of the narrative that these people are trying to push. I need to go back to the segment. I thought about it. As I said, these people are more successful than me, more experienced in life in general, in relationships, more accomplished, blah, 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 older. So what made them think that this was... I suppose the question on its own maybe isn't that stupid, because then you can get people's perspectives and maybe some women agree. And so it shows the different, opinions that people might have. But then when you're advocating for it, and essentially you're saying that absolutely, I am a high value man. I mean, I myself don't need to force or to even ask for it. But if ever my woman didn't feel like it, then she should remember that I'm the provider in the relationship, and therefore, she should provide the sex for me. And also this idea of should a woman give sex to her man, it is insane in the sense that that's not how sex works in a healthy way, right? If you're someone who pays for prostitutes, then yes, someone is providing sex. But if you're in a relationship, no one should be providing sex. It takes 2 people to have sex. Once again, if you're saying should a woman provide the sex to the man, it's like saying that she is doing something for you, or that it's one of your needs as a man to have sex, and therefore she's there to complete that need, to fulfill that need. Isn't sex a thing where 2 people are fulfilling each other's needs? And that's a beautiful thing about sex, is that there's 2 people and they come together and they make each other feel good. So that even the way they're painting sex is as this one-sided thing. they also ask questions like, is it more important for a man to essentially orgasm during sex than it is for a woman? Whose orgasm is more important? And then you get all these bimbos around the panel saying, well, the man's orgasm is more important. I mean, he's a provider financially, he protects me on the street if people try to attack us. Therefore, I need to give him that. I need to make sure he has his orgasm and mine is secondary. And once again, that's just completely backwards. You're both people. If you're in a relationship, you're there to love each other and provide for each other. And then and sex is this thing where what feels good about it is that you're both making each other feel good. And also, with the woman I was previously, we were not compatible, not just sexually, just all around, but definitely sexually. And I had a hard time giving her satisfaction when we were having sex. And I felt bad about it. And in hindsight, what I'm seeing is that we were simply not compatible. So if you're thinking about it this way, whose orgasm is more important, it suggests that you are in a situation where essentially you have a hard time giving satisfaction to your partner, which suggests that you're simply sexually incompatible. So I will go back to that segment. I'm taking notes for my own podcast, and I will definitely use that question to see how people feel about it. And that's really why I want to make this podcast and bring people on, is because I am inexperienced on the subject, and I feel what I feel based on my experiences. Now, experience is important, but this whole idea that, we look at people who are older than us as wiser than us, which makes sense. But based on my life and my experiences, I feel like a lot of people, they'll make the same mistake over and over again, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And a lot of people that you'll meet, who are older than you, when you get to know them, you realize that they are stuck in a loop, in a sense, and they're making the same mistake over and over again and not learning from it. So if you're 50 years old and you're still making the same mistake over and over again, you might understand that it's a mistake, and you might have that wisdom to a degree, but you're not applying it. So, and then you have someone who's 20 and who's made that mistake once and learned from it and grown from it. Who's more? Can you say that the older person their knowledge is more valuable? Can you say that they're wiser? No, they're older and they've just made the mistake more than you. If you made a mistake once and you learn from it, then you are more qualified to talk on the subject, I feel. So this whole idea that, if someone is older or if they have more experience, then they are necessarily more qualified to talk on the subject, I don't think it's the case, because once again, I feel good about the way that I see relationships and sex. I feel quite good. I feel like I have a balanced, healthy way of looking at it. And then I look at and talk with people who are older than me, more experienced. I look at on the internet, videos, people in general, and most people, it seems like, have more experience than me, and yet most people, or not most people, but a lot of people, especially popular people who get to affect the culture, it seems like they don't get it. They have a completely wrong way of looking at it. And I guess I'm targeting these relationship podcasts because I feel like they are purporting false narratives. These are the epitome of people who are experienced, especially compared to me, who are experienced in relationship, in sex, etc., in life in general. And I feel like their views are completely unhealthy. And so, once again, maybe I'm wrong. But if I, with what little experience I have, can understand and have what I feel like is a healthy way of looking at things, and then these people who have lived it, who have all this experience, have this incredibly unhealthy way of looking at it, then I'm prepared to test myself against them and to be proved wrong if I am. But I feel quite confident that for the most part they are dumbasses who have a completely unhealthy view on life. And so once again, it's not just about the quantity, it's also about quality. And I'm here talking about relationships and sex when I have so little experience, but I feel like I have a lot of experience, and I have some wisdom in terms of seeing things and understanding things and trying not to replicate things. The one relationship I had previous, which was toxic in many ways, I learned so much from it. Things that I will never do again, that I see people who are in their 10th, 20th, 100th relationship still making the same mistake. And then seeing from my parents' relationships, observing that, I feel like I have a lot of first-hand experience or second-hand experience on what is healthy and what isn't, on the many rules and parameters that need to be put in place to have something healthy. Oh, okay, next one. It's funny because when I started this, obviously I was uncomfortable in front of the camera, I was uncomfortable with speaking, uncomfortable with sharing my ideas because, the fear of being derided for them. And so talking about sex would never have entered my mind. All relationships would never have entered my mind, because that's such a, or being shirtless, that's such a vulnerable thing, and as I said, I don't have that much first-hand experience, so I would never have thought about it. But thanks to all these red pill gurus online, they have just given me the energy to say, oh, okay, I guess I can talk about it because these people are full of shit. So the next topic is giving head. My mother, as I mentioned before, my mother has told me that she watches these. So mom, if you're watching, you do what you want, you're an adult. You're an adult, I'm an adult, I have my ideas, if you want to listen, you can. It's probably uncomfortable for you. Giving head. That's the next topic. I hope that with this long podcast where I talk about all these, quite sexual topics, I hope that I've gotten them out of my system and I'll be able to talk about other things in the future. But the topic of giving head is interesting. It's interesting because in some cultures, and by culture I mean that there's culture in terms of country that has traditions that are thousands of years old, and then you have these more modern day cultures, like what you might, for example, the Afro-American culture. What is that? Because African Americans are not African, they're just American, they just happen to be black. So what's African about their culture? What's American? I suppose the term we use is African American. I feel like it's a weird term that in a way, I don't know if I would say it's racist, but it's not a good term to use, I think. It's just not. Because then the white Americans are what? They're European Americans. Especially African American. Like, no one in the world is African. As in, every country is drastically different from the next in Africa, just like in Europe. I'm not European. What does that mean to be European? It doesn't mean anything. I'm not even... And on the topic of this idea of African American, am I French? Am I British? I'm definitely not British. I suppose I'm more French, but I don't feel like I'm French. I'm more of a bastard in a way. I'm a mix. My culture is built from multiple cultures. And so when you look at the African American culture, there should be a new name, because they are as American as the European Americans and the Australian Americans, etc. They all come from somewhere else, but their culture is it's much more, for example, modern than European cultures, so the French, the Italian, etc. Their culture is this kind of new age culture. When you think about African American culture, a lot of negativity can be associated with it. I mean, that's a fact. When you think about the positives and the negatives, if you think about the positives, you might immediately think about music and the great musicians we have, the genres they've created. I mean, jazz, blues, how blues became rock and roll, etc. And these things were created out of negativity. The blues, when you have the blues, you're sad. I mean, the blues stems from wanting to express pain from oppression, from all these things. So it's strange to think that a lot of their culture stems from negativity, but that's a fact. And then you think about, I mean, hip-hop also wouldn't exist without the struggle that these people were in when they created it. And then what hip-hop to a lot of people means is representing negativity in general. You know, people talking about violence for the most part, degrading women. Now, I love hip-hop. I would say that I listen to the good artists, as in I don't listen to whatever Lil 69 Z or whatever people name nowadays with no substance. I like to listen to good music, and to artists, who are pushing the genre forward, who are skilled, who are poets. But that being said, a lot of the message in hip-hop, and if you ask a random person, for the most part, the messages are quite negative. And if you think about today, which, just like African Americans shouldn't be called African Americans because they are not African, they're just black Americans, they're Americans. Modern hip-hop should not be called hip-hop because it's not, it's garbage. It should have a different name. But so the topic was on culture, right? And how these new age cultures, have these different beliefs. And giving head nowadays in some cultures, which I won't name, and once again, when I say culture, you might think more of deeper cultures, which have decades or centuries or thousands of years behind them. And what I'm talking about is more this amalgamation of many different cultures in a more new age, modern body. And this idea of giving head, some men feel like they don't do it, and they feel like it's beneath them or wrong for them to do it. Which, once again, I'm someone who likes to question their own beliefs. So I listen to it, and I question myself. And the reasons they give will be, oh, it's disgusting. As in, the vagina itself is disgusting. Or as in, the idea of doing it is disgusting. Because they feel like it's a way that the man is submitting to the woman. He's in a submissive role. Is that... What else? Yeah, the idea that even being in that position physically as a man, it makes you look kind of submissive and weak and ugly. So I've wondered about this because, once again, I like to question myself, and I feel like a man's primary purpose in life is to become more powerful. And so I listen to it and I think, does it make sense? And so I've wondered, what happens in that during oral sex? This idea that who's in control? And I feel like all the best things, it is paradoxical, because I don't agree with this idea that when you're the person giving oral sex, that immediately puts you in a submissive role. I don't think it makes sense. If you're in that position, I don't want to get too graphic, but providing pleasure is not a submissive thing. Providing pleasure doesn't put you in a submissive position. When I was thinking about this, I immediately thought about who, in society, who gives pleasure? Who are people who you can think of that give pleasure? Now, I know it's not direct sexual pleasure, just it's pleasure in general. And then I think about artists, right? Artists provide pleasure, provide entertainment, which can be pleasurable. Do we think about artists as people who are beneath us because they are essentially devoting their lives to making something that will pleasure us or that will entertain us? No, we don't. The most successful artists are worshipped, literally, because they are able to provide something powerful. And, music is powerful. It's something that makes you feel something that, I guess I'll go to probably the most known artist in the world today, Kanye West. People worship him. And he makes music, and I appreciate his music. I love it. I think he's consistent, innovative. I don't like everything, but I think he's great. And so when I listen to his music, I think, wow, he's making me feel good. He's doing this thing that's beautiful. He's practiced it. He's great at it. I don't think for 1 second that he's in any way in a submissive role because he's providing me with this pleasure. Now, as an artist myself, I also understand that as an artist, you don't make art to pleasure people. That's not the goal. You make art because you feel compelled to do it, and because it makes you feel good as well. And so when a woman is providing pleasure to a man with oral sex, is she in a submissive position? I don't think so, because when you are doing this, once again, I don't want to get too graphic, but you're literally at the kind of, what do you call it, the sexual center of that person, where all these nerves are. You're pressing all the buttons to make that person experience bliss almost, right? You are in control. You're doing this thing that's providing this person with pleasure. And if you're good at it, that person absolutely must feel a sense that, of, I don't know, of awe, or of, once again, you listen to great music and you think, wow, that makes me feel good. That person is amazing, right? And so, personally, that's how I view it. That person is providing me with immense pleasure beyond music, right? An orgasm feels great. So that person is providing, and not just the orgasm, just that person is being attentive. They are paying attention to how I feel, and they're providing all this pleasure. Do I feel in any way like they are being submissive to me? No. In fact, it's, as I said, it's paradoxical, because it feels like the opposite. It feels like I'm in control of nothing, and that person here is in control of my pleasure. Once again, it's like they have they're behind the wheel. They're in control of how I feel. So I don't feel like that makes sense, this idea of submission. And once again, when I am the one providing pleasure, I don't feel in any way like I'm being submissive, like I'm being exploited or used. I feel powerful. As I said, I feel like I'm behind the wheel, in control of that person's pleasure and providing it, and I'm doing my best, and she is receiving it and enjoying it. So I feel good. So this whole idea of not giving head, I think, makes no sense. Now, I understand that people are different and feel differently about certain things. So what I'm saying is that objectively, I don't think it makes sense. But I understand that it's mostly culture, and this idea that you just can't do this because it will make you look bad. So I understand where they're coming from, but I feel like it's wrong, essentially. But once again, as I said, I'm covering these sexual topics, which I never thought I ever would. But I feel like it's quite important, and I feel like it's not something that, like this idea that I've just talked about, the paradox of how providing pleasure, what is providing pleasure? I don't feel like that's something I've ever heard being talked about. I'm not saying it has never been talked about. I'm just saying it's not really that big in the conversation. And a lot of people who are popular, especially these, high value icons, will mention, no, I don't do it. I'm a high value man, I'm powerful, I'm this, I'm that. I won't kind of kneel in front of my woman and do this for her. That is beneath me. And I think that, once again, I've covered it in quite a long segment here, and these people will mostly say, I don't do it. I'm successful, I'm in great shape, I'm a high value man, I won't do that, that's beneath me, etc. They have these few points. But that sends a message, once again, to young people who look at them, who respect them, and think, yeah, if this guy who's extremely successful believes that, then who am I to question him, And so, yeah, I think that could have, a negative impact, the way it's been talked about. So as weird as it feels to talk about this, I feel like it's valuable and important. And once again, I haven't really heard people talk about it in those terms. And this idea that when you are, we'll keep it, blunt, when you are given head, you are not in a submissive position. You can be. I suppose there's people are into all sorts of things, but in the more kind of standards, you're in a relationship with a woman, you provide pleasure to one another in that sense. I don't see in any way how that can be seen as being submissive to the woman. And these people, these things are linked, because these people don't feel like, they feel like the male orgasm, for example, is more important than the female orgasm. So they have this whole what's the word, black and white way of looking at things, really devaluing what a relationship can be by devaluing the woman, which I feel is negative. And all these modern day gurus, which I won't name, the biggest ones, the big ones, the less big ones, it seems like all of them are old pickup artists. It seems like they all started by, teaching losers how to have game. And the premise behind having game is, how can you, on the surface, be an attractive man? Now, naturally, attraction starts on the surface. You approach someone because they are attractive. But there are all these other layers of what a person is. And these people focus so much on the surface, on the idea of perception, first impressions. And they don't talk as much about who you are as a person, right? The antidote they give to these incels is, if you can look like the part, then that's good enough. If you become eloquent enough to have game and to be able to talk to a woman and convince her to have sex with you, then that's a game. You have game now, you're good. They don't talk enough about how, no, it's the tiny little things that you need to fix to become a better person. That's more important. In fact, having game is not that important in terms of, if you work on yourself and becoming the best person you can be, then people will gravitate towards that. And Jordan Peterson answers this question. How do you get a partner? I think something like that. And he immediately goes against all those people and says, no, you should focus on. Don't think about your ideal partner. Focus on what the ideal version of you would be. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. When you start focusing on yourself and becoming the best person you can be, then that's a useful approach. If you learn to sell yourself and attract people and bring them to you, that doesn't teach you to be in a relationship. That doesn't teach you to be the best person to be in a relationship with. That teaches you to just attract things and get things. The healthy approach is, how do you make yourself the best version of yourself, so that once you do find that person who's right for you, you can be happy for the rest of your life, essentially. And the way these people talk about, once again, relationships, the next note is on Myron from Fresh and Fit. The way these people talk about relationships is very much like a business partnership as opposed to a relationship. A business partnership where you're kind of counting what each other is providing and you're doing transactions, and they don't seem to be the ideal partner. They seem to be the ideal, high value man that will attract women in the club type of person, but they don't give off vibes of someone you want to be with forever. Well, I talked about this whole idea of the high value man previously, and said that to me you need to be a well man, as in you need to have these 3 attributes which are more useful, because once again, the way they paint that picture, if you're suave, you look good, you're in good shape, you're wealthy, and you know how to talk to people, then you can get a woman, right? They don't talk about how you need to be in control of your emotions, for example. In terms of a long-term relationship, if you are wealthy, successful, good-looking, in shape, blah, 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 but you can't control your emotions, that's not going to work out. You're both going to be miserable. So these foundational attributes are more important than the surface stuff. And so Myron gets asked this question in a podcast: do you feel like your partner would stay with you if you lost all of your money? And he doesn't answer it. He doesn't say yes. He tiptoes around the question, and then eventually he says that he would never lose all his money. He's invested intelligently enough that would never happen, so he doesn't have to worry about it. And that's the problem. That's a huge problem, because the way he talks about relationships, about love, about his girlfriend and everything, there doesn't seem to be a relationship with love there. It's a business partnership. You should be able to answer the question with yes. Just yes. That's the point. You're in a relationship. If your house burns down and everything around you too burns down, everything, you lose everything, you still have each other. That's the point of relationship, isn't it? You have each other. You trust that person. You love that person. You know that person. You're honest with each other. You know how they behave. You know they have your back. You know you have their back. It's a total commitment. That's the thing. It's a commitment. You're there for me. I'm there for you. You're my one. I'm your one. I'm saying to you that I am willing. I am ready to spend the rest of my life with you. Right? So if we lose all our money, if we lose everything, if I lose my legs, if you lose your ears, if you lose your arms, you're the person I picked. I love you. That's the answer, isn't it? How is the answer? I'm never going to lose my money. Therefore, I'm never going to find out if she truly loves me. Essentially, he's literally saying, I can afford her. Essentially, no, I can afford her forever, so I don't have to think about it. And these people vary in intelligence. The guy who asked the question, should a woman, is it a woman's duty to provide sex for a man? He doesn't seem to be that bright. Myron seems to be quite intelligent. But the way he really, like, his answer essentially is saying that his belief of what relationships are, as a person who only talks about relationships and who's affecting the culture in a huge way and who's talking to these people who are impressionable, supposedly giving them the answer. What he's saying is that in his eyes, you become a high value man so that you can afford your woman for the rest of your life, essentially. And it's crazy because I definitely watch too much of that stuff. It's partly entertainment for sure, a little bit research, and so you hear all these people who mostly agree and have this disgusting opinion on what love and relationships are and sex, and then I go out in the real world and have a discussion with a person, and I hear a woman saying, "I want to be with a man and build our lives together." I'm not looking to find a man who's wealthy and kind of enter his life. I would love to find a man that I can build a life with. And to me, that was a shock when I heard this. Why? Because when I watch these videos, these podcasts, Myron will say it 100 times, and then his minions will repeat it. All the little, cultists, all the people part of this weird modern cult, they'll say it. A woman wants to move in. She doesn't want to build a castle with you. She wants to move in. He'll say it over and over again. And then all these people in the chat, and everyone who's seeing this and absorbing it is like, yeah, that's the way it works. As a man, you want to build a castle, you want to make yourself the most attractive version of yourself possible, and then just like flies attracted to shit, they'll just swarm you and they'll move in the castle with you because they don't want to build a life with you. And I've just listened to this on repeat. I'm not a very sociable person, and so I just watch these things, and then I go out in the real world and I hear a real person, and she has just a healthy way of looking at things. Because isn't that the beautiful thing? Isn't that the way to see? Isn't that the way to build a relationship? To actually build it. I had this conversation recently about prenups, for example, with my girlfriend, and the idea that, in my opinion, the idea of a prenup is disgusting. Because it's just wrong. How do I say this? I understand that you can't predict the future. You don't know what's going to happen. Something might change them in a way. That's true. But the whole point of being in a relationship is that you're getting to know that person. And then if you want to take it a step further, like marriage, you're going to do that. You're going to say, let's get married, because you feel like, okay, I found the one. We are compatible. I trust that person. She trusts me, blah, blah, blah. Right? So the idea of a prenup goes against that, because it's saying, I don't trust you, essentially. And the problem is that, once again, people have this mind state that Myron purports. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not gonna look at it. That Myron, shares this narrative that you make yourself the high value man with the money, and then the women will come. Yes, well, when that's your approach, then the people who you attract are dishonest, inauthentic, they're fake. So naturally, you need to sign a prenup because you're on this business relationship with that person. It's just wrong. And I understand this idea that, I understand it. I've never experienced it, but I understand that logically, if you are a successful man and you have acquired all this wealth, then it's scary to get into a relationship and to take things further, because it's hard to know whether that person, truly loves you. Which, once again, if you find someone when you're not successful and you build a life together, then I feel like that negates that point, right? Because she was with you when you didn't have the success, which I feel like is a healthier way of doing things. So I suppose I'm lucky that I'm broke, but it's makes sense. You're successful, you're wealthy. People are going to be attracted to that, and it's hard to tell who's telling the truth. But that's when being a human being and spending time with a person and getting to know a person and being honest and asking for honesty back and being patient, that's where that comes into play. Because, for example, if you're extremely wealthy and you find a woman, I suppose one thought you must have is, I'm not going to get married within a week or a month, which in any case seems like a bad idea all the time. But you're going to wait. You're going to get to know that person. Now, you might be with a psycho who will just tolerate you, for 4 years, even though they don't actually love you, which is scary. But I feel like in most cases, if you're patient and if you're being honest, and you're not building all of these, I've got money, therefore she's with me, and blah blah blah. You're not being this fake person. If you're someone who's worked on themselves and you're the best version of yourself, and you're paying attention to what she's given back, then the idea of a prenup sounds ridiculous. So they're just building these narratives of how can you be an insecure man with a lot of wealth and have a miserable life. That's an old note. I didn't mention it last week because last week's podcast was SHIT. But a few weeks ago I went climbing with my brother and his friend, and I hadn't gone in 2 weeks. Once again, for the past months I haven't worked out. I'm in terrible shape. And we did deadlifts because my brother was saying that deadlifts are easy, that he could lift a certain weight. And I've been increasing my deadlifts slowly, super slow because it's scary. And my max was not high at all. And so I was there with my brother and his friend. And the objective was absolutely to go as fast as possible. And I got to we all got to 120 kilos. It was my brother's first time doing deadlifts. His friend has been doing it for a while. And me, I was doing it for like 5 weeks, I think, slowly increasing the weight. I was far from 120. And, well, firstly, my brother works out regularly. He's in good shape, so clearly, I think that doing 120 on your first go is quite impressive. I'm not an expert, but that sounds like a lot. I did 120, and immediately I thought of how beneficial it is to have partners in anything you do, people around you, pushing you. And I mean, there's that. I've mentioned it before multiple times, even though I don't apply it. Having brothers, that's something that people in that red pill space do talk about, that it's positive. As men, having brothers around you, pushing you, spending time with them, doing things, challenging each other is healthy. And I experienced that day. I work out by myself, and there's a tremendous difference when you're with someone else who's pushing you and you're pushing them. That energy is completely different. So it is something I should pursue more. I want to join a boxing club as soon as possible. Although, as I mentioned, my finances are in a terrible place currently. But I feel like that would be... I could get that experience of being with a group of men with a similar goal, pushing each other. I like the challenge. And I also did my first muscle ups last week, which I had been trying for a while when I was working out regularly, and now I haven't been working out in months, and I did it. So I was happy. Always wanted to be able to do muscle ups, and my brother did muscle ups as well. So I don't know, it's weird because as I mentioned, as soon as I started working out, I thought, one day I would love to be able to do muscle ups, and I was never able to. and I didn't really work towards it, and then I achieved it. So that was weird. I suppose technique plays a big role in it. It's not just strength. But I remember the first time I did a Nordic curl, and I had been working on it for a few weeks. I was ecstatic. It's one of the happiest days of my life, because when you work towards something and you achieve it, that feels really good. And I know that Nordic curls are quite difficult to do. And this time I didn't feel a fraction of that. So I don't know what's up with that. In Paris, I also did my first sparring session. We went to a boxing training session, I suppose. Just my brother, my father, a friend of his, and me. And we were trained. And good golly gosh, so much cardio required in boxing. Lord. Obviously, as I mentioned, I haven't been working out recently, so my cardio was shit. And I was sparring with my brother at the very end. And my left, so I'm right-handed, so my left arm was my jab. I'm longer than him, so as an advantage, I was using that to control the distance and poke at him. My arm was dead. I need to work on my physical endurance. It's terrible. But the whole sparring session felt great. Punching and getting punched feels so good. I was quite apprehensive because I've never done it before. I remember I did I did went to a boxing club once. And all we did was cardio. We did cardio for the whole thing. We ran, we hit the punching bag, it was horrible. As in, my cardio was bad then, it's always been bad anyways. And there was the ring. And there were people sparring, more experience, obviously. It was my first time. And I thought the idea of sparring is scary. The idea of getting punched, especially the idea of it's my first time, so I'm most likely going to be outmatched. I thought it was quite scary. So before the training session, I did feel a bit of nerves. The idea of how am I going to react when I get punched repeatedly? How am I going to react when my cardio gives out and I can't really give back and I'm just getting beat up because my brother has much better cardio than me? So I did feel those nerves. And then it just felt great. Now, naturally, my brother is not an experienced boxer. So there wasn't a huge difference. But it just felt good. Even when I was, quote unquote, losing or getting punched, it all felt good. And punching felt good, it all felt good. Also, I definitely have a strong flinch reflex. Especially mostly when I take my glasses off, because everything's blurry. So anytime something comes towards me, I'm not as adept with my reflexes at parrying and moving out of the way. So I have a strong flinch reflex, which is something I need to work on. But, you get punched a few times in the face and you realize, it's not that bad. So, yeah, I'm just more excited now to join a boxing club and learn to move and punch and get punched. On the topic of boxing, putting your foot down. Now, the whole principle of this topic is just anti-procrastination, essentially. When I released some of my past traumas, etc., I felt much better after it. And it's because I had been holding on to it for a long time. As I said, baggage, makes you weaker, more sensitive, all these things. And essentially that's procrastination. I had been holding on to it for a while when I should have released it. And I'm a big procrastinator. And recently I've been thinking more about the idea that acting now is essential. It's extremely important. Putting your foot down. So the topic here was more about when something irks you, when someone does something you don't like. I was thinking about it more in terms of I had been doing something that I shouldn't have been, and someone didn't mention it to me. And so I put myself in their shoes in terms of someone is doing something that affects me negatively, and it's compounding, and I'm not dealing with it, right? So that was the perspective of the other person. So I went and talked to that person about it, and I thought to myself, on one hand, I thought, it's kind of your fault. You should have said something. You can blame me, but if you had said something at the very start, then it could have been stopped, and if I continued, you could have gone in and, you know, said it again and been more direct and more blunt and made it clear that it wasn't correct what I was doing. So I did feel a sense of, it's your fault. And so when I thought about this, I thought, if someone is doing something that is irking me, it's also my responsibility to act on it and tell them. And I suppose that applies to everything. If there's something that needs to be done, don't let it fester, don't procrastinate, don't wait, because that eats at you and that makes you weaker. Speak now. On the topic of speaking, recently I discovered the magic of technology, of communicating through technology, texting specifically. I had an argument with someone via texting, and the thing with texting is I don't like communicating through your phone like that when it's something important. The reason I don't like it is because I feel like it's cowardly. I asked a girl out once via text message, and I felt terrible after that because I felt like that was a cowardly thing to do. You should be able to do it, face to face, because it's harder. And so I have this whole narrative in my head that anything important that needs to be said in person. And so I had this argument via text, which went much better than my previous arguments with that person that were in person. And I realized, when you're texting, there isn't that physical aspect to it. You can't run out of the room. You can't even shout, really. You can say hurtful things, sure, but it's more difficult through text because it's being, quote unquote, immortalized. It's there. You can see it physically, visually. So it kind of opened my eyes to the idea that, once again, you think about the spectrum. I was on one extreme thinking every important, not even that important, everything needs to be said in person. And I realized that sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's better to do it now via text than to wait a week, for example, if you're away. And another example of this is sometimes someone would offer me something or do something nice for me, and I wasn't there in person. And so I would think, well, I'll thank them when I see them in person. And sometimes you don't know when you're going to see that person in person. And so I realized that this was more a form of procrastination than anything. So now I try my best. If something has to be said, and it can't be said in person, very soon, with certainty, then just say it in text. It's okay. Because I understand that the reason I'm texting is not because I'm cowardly. It's because it's the best approach at the moment. The best approach ideally would be talking in person, but if that's not possible, then the second best approach is to just do it via text, as opposed to waiting, however long it's going to take. So I know that sounds weird, but I literally discovered that communicating through messages, has its place, even when it's something important. I think 50 Cent is an underrated rapper, one of the best ever. And he has a lot of good quotes. And one of his quotes is, "I hate a liar more than I hate a thief. A thief is after my salary, a liar is after my reality." And that's a great quote. And this emphasis on telling the truth is something that I've tried to reinforce in myself as much as possible. And in these podcasts, that's what I do. I tell the truth. There's no space here. There's not a second, a minute, not a frame that is there for deceit. I might withhold information, naturally. I can't just talk about everything and anything. But everything I say must be true. And it's interesting in a sense that, well, it's interesting because I've said a lot of things that I don't agree with now. I've said in the past. So, it's normal. You learn and you grow. But, Jordan Peterson also talks about lying and how bad it is. And I suppose it's complicated. You should strive, I believe, to tell the truth as much as possible. But I've also been a lazy, honest person at times, where I would just always tell the truth, regardless of how that made people feel. And so I suppose there needs to be balance between the two. Never invest time or money without a contract. Another thing I've learned recently. Once again, I've been lazy, and it's beyond important to establish the rules and the expectations when you get into a venture with someone. Something I haven't done recently, as in a specific project. And there's a quote that I love, or an idea from Blood Meridian, which is one of my favorite books. The idea that men are made for games and play is nobler, more noble than work. And I suppose life, you could look at it as a game, and every aspect of life as a game. And all games have parameters, they have rules. Once again, Jordan Peterson talks about this idea that, I don't remember if it's in regards to hierarchies, but he talks about, I think it is about hierarchies. This idea that, all games have rules, that's just the way it is. Everything has rules. If I tell you let's play a game and I don't tell you the rules, it's not fun for anyone, you don't know what to do. So all games have rules. And when you get into a professional partnership, or you do a job for someone, or you get into a friendship even, it's important to establish what the expectations are and what the rules are going to be. Otherwise, as I've learned, you find yourself being quite lost and you make each other miserable. And so that's something recently that I've been good at doing in some aspects of my life. Talking about things, talking about expectations, talking about how one feels about what's happening. Really reflecting honestly as much as possible. But professionally, I haven't. Professionally, I've been quite lazy. And I've realized that this way of approaching things in general, like it's a game, is super important. Establishing what are the rules, what are the expectations in any area of your life. To structure things is incredibly important. So I mentioned some films at the start. Cocaine Bear, best film of the year. The Killer. I thought about this recently, how The Killer is similar to Drive. It's similar because it is so idiosyncratic in its making. Well, Drive is the movie that made me want to make movies. Because when I watched Drive for the first time, and it's not because it's the only film that does that, or the first film that I had seen that does that, but it's the first time I realized this idea that a film doesn't have to be a carbon copy of another film. It doesn't have to be this repetitive thing. A film can be its own thing 100%. Have its own texture, its own vibe, its own, as a filmmaker, you can affect everything on the screen, everything in the experience to make it its own thing. That's why I love Paul Thomas Anderson. Every film he makes is its own thing. Every detail he's thought about, the way it's going to be shot. Every film is its own game with its own rules. Certain things he doesn't do, certain things he does do. He doesn't use a gimbal much. There Will Be Blood, he uses the gimbal quite a lot. That's part of the rules of the film. These long shots. Every film he makes has its own rules. And Drive is a very, as I said, idiosyncratic film with its own rules. The opening scene, the music, everything is so specific. And so that was the first time when I saw that I realized, I can indulge, I can be myself in this medium, because I can say, I'm a bit of a control freak and a perfectionist. I can say, I can affect every aspect of it. And there are many aspects to affect in films, more so than in most other mediums. And so The Killer, I thought about this recently, it's very similar. It's similar to Drive in the fact that it's so idiosyncratic and that the story is so similar. It's the classic, the Le Samurai, classic loner who doesn't speak much and who's the killer. And I didn't like The Killer that much, but I liked Drive. Drive is about the driver, the killer is about the killer. Oppenheimer, it was really good. It was really good. I didn't love it, but it was really good. Killers of the Flower Moon, shit. It was boring as fuck. confusing, long, super long. Aquaman and Rebel Moon. I saw a review recently of Rebel Moon, and the title, I clicked on it because of the title. I don't need to see a review. Well, I do want to watch reviews of Rebel Moon because I'm curious what redeeming qualities anyone might find in that movie. But I clicked on the review because it was positive, and I thought, who the fuck is stupid enough, is clueless enough, is tasteless enough to say that this was a good film? Not even to say. I could argue with someone who says it had redeeming qualities. Perhaps there was good things about it, but someone who says that it's a good film, whew, highly upsetting. And Rebel Moon is an awful garbage film. I'm someone who likes to question themselves. I try to avoid talking in absolutes. I'm not God. I can be wrong. If there's anything I'm certain of, is that Rebel Moon is a shit, awful pile of garbage movie. It's terrible. It's disgusting. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's just horrible. A waste of time and energy. And it starts with the script. The script is terrible. It was written by an incompetent screenwriter, beyond the shadow of a doubt. I would like to make movie reviews. It just sounds difficult. I don't know how to approach it. So obviously, I've talked about this film before, but I'll talk about it again. Rebel Moon is Star Wars for adults. It's just copied from Star Wars. In the review, the person is much more qualified to talk about movies. He mentions other movies that this is similar to, some 80s sci-fi movies which no one has ever seen or remembers. But I'm going to calm down and I'm going to try to be more analytical about this. So, but how? It's so bad. I don't see the use in analyzing it or stating that it's bad in any way. It's just so obvious. It's undeniably awful. I don't have anything to say. Aquaman, awful. Shit, garbage, useless. The first one, I kind of liked it. The first one was very kitsch, very cheesy. It's a film for the kids. And there were things about the way it was shot and the way it was presented that were interesting. There was the scene in the lighthouse where, what's her name? The old lady that's trying not to look old. Nicole Kidman fights off intruders. And the way it's shot was a bit similar to that Kendrick Lamar video. The camera moves in this very deliberate, staged ways, and it all looks fake, and it works. It was interesting. It was something I hadn't seen before, and the way they shot the fight scene. It was interesting. And so I went to see Aquaman 2 thinking, oh, there's going to be more of that. And I don't like showy filmmakers. I watched Leave the World Behind recently, and, there's no, being showy is not a good thing. If the audience is thinking, oh, how did the camera go through the window? That doesn't help the movie. It was just bad. The way it was shot, Leave the World Behind, it was just super showy. Not in a way that enhances the experience. And so Aquaman 1, once again, the camera was quite showy at times. And I did enjoy it in terms of how it's inspiring. That could be done better in a way that wouldn't feel as fake and plasticky and as showy. Could be done better, so that was inspiring. To me, that's kind of pushing, in a way, the mediums of cinema. You do it badly for the first time and then you improve on it. And then in this one, they don't do anything. There's one shot that I remember, as in, that was a showy shot. With the camera, they're in the bad guy's lair, and the camera follows the characters running up the stairs, and then it goes through the window, and I thought, did they build the set? An enormous set, or perhaps, it's mostly cutting different shots together. So I thought, oh, that was a showy shot. It was just a showy shot. But there was nothing. There was nothing in that movie. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There wasn't even the Aquaman turns to the camera and says, hell yeah. And the camera zooms in on him. Well, the camera is right there in front of Jason Momoa's face and he goes, hell yeah. Which was funny in the first one. In the second one, he's driving his motorcycle at the start. It's literally just Jason Momoa, any of his Instagram posts, they just took it, put it in the film. And it wasn't interesting. The whole thing was garbage. It was a pile of garbage. Oh, it was bad. So bad. There was nothing in it. Absolutely nothing. And then The Unbearable Weight of Talent. I think it's something like that with Nick Cage. And it's like Cocaine Bear. It's one of those films where I don't have any expectations. It's just going to be another one of those films. And it's quite funny. And you want to keep watching because the pacing and the way it's written is quite enticing. So I haven't finished The Unbearable Weight of Talent, or whatever it's called, but it's good so far. I don't know, they make these movies like Rebel Moon and Aquaman, which are just a pain to sit through. At least make it exciting. Get the pace right. Why? Once again, making a movie is a game, and when you write a script, there are rules, and if you're writing that type of movie, you want it to have great pacing. It's not intellectual, it's not about learning things, it's not that interesting. All you have to offer is entertainment. So make it good. And there are rules you can follow to make sure that it's good. It's possible. It's quite simple, actually. Recently, someone asked me to give them a script I've written. And I've never finished a script in my life. But there's this script that's quite close to completion. And I need to finish it because I have a motivation to finish it if someone wants to read it. And I'm going to do my best. I hope it's going to be good. I believe in that script. There are a lot of good things about it. So I just need to finish the script. So I'm hoping this was long. I'm hoping this was the longest episode I've done. I don't think it's 2 hours at all. Can you imagine though? I spent 2 hours just talking. I'm sure it's not 2 hours. It's less. But I spent a long time just talking about random stuff in an unstructured way. And the day outside, the sky is just going about its day, moving, clouds, shuffling to the right, slowly. And people are doing their thing. I'm just here talking in my bedroom. I need to finish the music video, the animated video, and the script. I have 10 days of freedom. 10 days before I go back to work. I need to be on my game and finish those things in those 10 days. It's doable. It's doable. Like when I finish the video, I'm gonna be proud of myself. The music video, the animated video, it's gonna be something that I'm gonna be truly proud of as an artist. Something that I've made that I'm gonna be proud of. When I finish the other music video, I'm gonna be quite proud of it as well. It's interesting. And when I finish the script, I'm gonna be proud of myself for finishing that script. So I mentioned this in other episodes before, but I've never been proud of something I made as an artist. Like truly proud. Looking at it and thinking, wow, that's something that's good. One day I will feel that. I need to work on structure. I mean, these episodes show how unstructured I am and how my thinking is unstructured. But recently my aunt was mentioning that she's been on my website looking at my work, which is really nice. As in, it's really nice that she did that. And she herself isn't an artist. And she was mentioning how her sister, my mother, is an artist, and how in the family, we're artists after my mother. My father, my brothers, my brother, my sister, me. And she was mentioning how, oh, I envy you. You're an artist. That's cool. And then she kind of started listing the things on my website, the things I do. And I'm proud of it. As in, oh, I do filmmaking and writing and photos and blah, blah, blah. And I'm happy about it. I'm proud of it. These are the things I'm passionate about. But I need to figure out a way to make it work because it's not working. It's not working. I haven't taken photos in so long, and I love taking photos. And it's a weird thing. Imagine you're a musician, you make music. If you go without making music for a while, it's depressing, it makes you feel bad because that's who you are. That's what you're meant to be doing, and that's what fulfills you. And I know it might sound weird, but I feel that way about every art form that I like to practice. And so if I'm making films and writing, I don't think, oh, I'm making films and writing, and so I'm being fulfilled. I think, oh, I'm not taking pictures, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. So the only way I can be fulfilled and happy is if I'm practicing these daily, all of them. And the only way to do that is to really schedule and be pragmatic and structured. Yeah, I responded to the comments because I received a few about 10 days ago. I responded just recently. I was distracted for the past week, Paris, etc. And also, I was procrastinating, didn't know exactly how to reply. And, thank you for the comments. Thank you for the people who watch. Thank you for everything. I shall keep going. I definitely need to find a way to kind of change it, make it more challenging. Well, the structure thing, obviously. Oh, my shoulder. What the fuck? Alright, thank you. The camera is still on. The mic. What you doing, buddy? Why? Alright. Thank you. Ah! Why? Battery was on 3, my G. You don't know how to count? What happened? Alright, in the past, when a technical difficulty happened, I mentioned it in the episode after, because I learned it after I recorded it. I don't know what I'm going to do this time. I suppose I'm going to have to use the sound from the camera, which could be usable. I've done it before. It's going to sound worse than usual. What? Also, normally, when I find out that there was a technical difficulty, it's after I've recorded, so you don't hear me reacting. What happened? I turned it on. There's video evidence. I turned this thing on. I pressed record. The battery is still at 3. What's up with my equipment? Just fucking me over. Oh, I didn't mention the frame is different than usual. It's wide. Felt like changing. I'm shouting now because I'm gonna use the sound from the camera, and I need to be louder because it's further and it's worse. I'm using a wider aspect ratio just to switch things up. Probably just for this episode, we'll see. Alright, thank you. Happy New Year. And thank you. Happy New Year and thank you. Can I say this more sincerely? Happy New Year and thank you, perhaps? I don't know. Why do this? Oh, what the hell? Oh, I thought this was not as malleable. Thank you. Happy New Year and thank you. I don't know why I want to keep talking. I'm just upset now. I plugged the camera in last week and it shut off. This time it did not shut off. I don't know what I did wrong last time. And the funny thing is, when that happens, then I go into the video editing thing, like last week, and I put the video clip in, and the sound clip in, and I see, oh, the video clip is 30 seconds. Wonderful. So now I will soon find out how long the sound recording is. Maybe there's a limit on how long you can record continually, I don't know. Did I even record anything on this? It's possible I didn't. The least I can do with these podcasts is record the sound and the video properly. That's the least. That's the minimum amount of effort. Alright, I'm gonna soon find out how much I fucked this up. And the camera's going strong, it's still recording. When I don't really need the visual that much. Sound is king. Ooh, sound.